This may be a very long speech, but I'm going to try to put it as wise as possible because I've seen it, and I'm going to try to put it in our words because it may sound simply described, but I'm trying to put it in truth. Okay, so you're nothing, then you're light, then you malfunction, not malfunction, but you change. You change your own light with thought. You don't regard it yet. You feel it through heat, through sensitivity. Through that heat and sensitivity, you're floating, you're hovering, you're not moving. You're not going anywhere, but you are everywhere. You're particleized. So those particles weren't moving. But then you felt the heat, and the heat was everywhere. Now let's move on and come back to the heat, and we'll try to get that he-at. Okay, you are the heat. The heat is the movement. Parts of the heat start feeling like they're coming off of you, like you're letting part of something go. Yourself. Something that you had, something that was always there, you're letting part of it go. The heat. You're letting it go, so it's cooling down. It's going down. You left it behind, it's cooling down. As it cools down, it changes. It starts feeling its own thing, and you still have your heat. But something that you left behind, or left down behind you, cooled. And as it cooled, it made different feelings of shape and mass. And other masses joined to it by feelings of heat and cool. Now, for a while, through different shapes of what we call rocks, or particles at that point, you learn stability. And you let things push you around as the solid mass you are. And as that solid mass of cooled light, or what we call light, is the best I can explain it, cools down even more, or hardens more, or gets heated back up, or moves itself around, it has different things. And as those different things happen, those begin to assimilate the thought from the light they were. So it was thought, then light, then heating and cooling, then movement by being pushed by the heat itself and the light itself, by the thought itself. Then it's individual thought, not just inside itself, to move on its own. So it's got thought, it doesn't recognize its color yet, it doesn't recognize what's solid, it doesn't recognize any of these things yet. But it senses that it can move towards other things without help. And it finds ways to move. And because it's been through little particleized, what we call shapes, now it uses other shapes to somehow move itself because it's been moved by other things that it saw. This thing stopped it and blocked it. This thing let it free. So they would grab things and connect with them and be able to operate them and be able to move slowly but surely on a small level. So then on the smallest level, those things moved around. And this is all happening in thought without mass first. All these things are happening without mass. In amazing sizes and shapes without mass or matter. This is still light, heat, and the idea of solidity. Nothing was there to observe this. So, from that of movement, of sensitivity, of idea, of heat, then an eye opened in some way of chemical, gas, rock, thought. And it opened a vision in the eye of the created omnipotence itself. And when it opened that eye, it shined a little spark. And the little spark remembered all the things it formed in its mass and could see them. So it gave them all that extra vision of sight. And since they were already sensing and feeling by movement, now that sight gave them ideas. And since things could appear a little differently because of their heat and their whatever, everything else, all the things I've mentioned, they started thinking about each other. And they themselves didn't think enough about themselves. So what others thought about them was also happening. But at this point, this wasn't speech. This was through thought. So thought did a lot of things. All the mythological and all the things in all the billions of planets happened. All of them. Then they developed thoughts through their planets. Their planets destroyed and left light as a pocket of its energy. And somewhere that we'll never physically reach and know as a human being. But as what we are, it's here. And all those things are moving in time-space continuums, but in a vessel of one spiritual being. That is, being itself, omnipotent being, omnipotent being, right now, right here, everything. So when there is no signs of anything, thought, heat, solidity, after cooling down and letting itself go, movement from being forced from the original heat and thought. Then an eye opened from the heat, thought, movement, wanting to move on its own, wanting to be able to see and sense. So then it was more like a feeling sense of what we call our skin feeling, but a vibrational sense that moved and shook things. And as it moved and shook things, it opened new portals. And a portal is just more of an expression to say that from what was, something was perceived and observed. And then it added another active life ingredient. Pour, a whole, plus AL. Something in the form of something else. So it added, through its pour, something else. So a portal isn't just something you walk in through and go in. You have a million portals in yourself. Every pore is a portal from your skin to the outside world, breathing and observing light and oxygen and all the chemicals that land on it, go in your senses, go in your different organs. All those things, they're all portals. You just don't want to think that way because that's not how it was explained to you, but it's the truth. You have pores. What do you think pores are? Mini bitty portals. That's what they are. Portholes. Pores. You just, when you talk about them, you put a plus symbol on them. You're adding it to what you're talking about. So anyway, from those solid movement, and all of a sudden we have feeling and vibration, sensitivity, which brings the most amazing organisms that were shelled and couldn't really see, but had miniature little developments that could reflect a light off of one thing that's hotter and make a spot in that area that wasn't as hot. Say a shelled thing with a soft body inside. Its body and its members got hot in different spots too. They cooled, they grew, they formed, they started moving on their own, but they stayed inside that shelled thing. That little contained body organism started having things move inside it. And from its original idea, just like the great big out of matter thing, thought happened, then heat happened, then motion of heat happens in different coolings, and as they cool, more individual thought happens from those things as they're cooling, and they start grabbing and gathering more, and now we're in an organic mass sense. At first, rocks didn't have to be organic. Nobody talked to them and told them they couldn't. And now, we evolved from the rocks who moved on to plants. And how did they move on to plants? One rock was softer. From the elements, we have water and light. Light is the contributor, of course, of water, air, space, gas. Those are all different levels of heat and light. So I didn't mean to disinclude the elements, but those are all parts of what I said by the heating and solidifying. Those are gases and solids and water and light and all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to say this as fast, but as accurately and in time as possible. And it's so hard because I'm a person I'm not in my meditative zone, but I'm just in that mind. I'm always coming from my third eye, as we say, but I don't want to use just common now popular words. I don't want to use a trendy word. Third eye is just a trend now, but it's the truth if you use it for what it really means. So anyway, the third eye is what we see with, because we are a being. Basically, it's the bean that is the seed inside our forehead. Like a seed that you would open up a bean. Like I would say a big green bean or a yellow bean or a blue or purple bean, there's different colors of beans. But those big beans that are different colors that are higher on the spectrum of the rainbow, have little tiny seeds in them that look like other beans. Those were once great masters. I know you don't want to understand that, but they were. They're once great masters, all in a little capsule of their own. Like I said, a mass with things going inside of that cool and heat at different temperatures, start thinking on their own and start doing their own things inside an original mass of solidified whatever. We call our body that, but our body isn't solid, but it's still different versions of vibration, which are those thought, heat, sound, movement, mass, all those kind of things, all in those maybe not specific orders, but I've mentioned them before. So, like in that way of the rock and the different heats and the different elements wearing on it, shining different light, heating different spots, making different colors, causing spectrums and glass and prism and gem type things to reflect and shine, causing eyes to be formed by catching reflections and remembering to their source, because now new stimuli were there when the one omnipotent brought light into vision. But that's because it itself had to go through time to spawn itself. But at the same time, people will not understand this. But in no way is it not understandable that to come from nowhere, you can do whatever the hell you want to and appear as whatever you want to. And we have done that so many times. We don't do it much anymore, not here on Earth, but it happens a lot. In fact, there's nothing that's not happening right now. That's the hardest thing to come back to, is that there's nothing that's not happening. You're just living as your ego, thinking that this is a big deal to you in this moment. In the next moment, you'll think it's a big deal because you won't have time away from your ego. And if you ever break away from your ego, you'll see what I mean for a second and then go back to your ego. And that's excusable. Once in a while. A billion lives or so, sure. But after that, you got to start catching on to it. And most indigo children are just being born in their third eye and remembering their bean. Their bean is that third eye in their head. Like a bean inside of a green bean, yellow bean, or anything up from that is basically the living essence of a fallen master or someone who died with good spirit in their heart. The reason there's so many things that are like kidney beans, red beans, all those kind of things that give you gas. The reason they give you gas is because if you have too many of those shelled big beans, those are people who didn't live purely. Those are beings at one time who lived impurely. So they came back in a shell of what they once were. A red symbolized or orange symbolized bean. So you don't want to eat red or orange beans, especially if you cook them and make them that color when they were originally another color. Like if you take a cannellini bean and it's a white bean and you add red to it, it becomes a red bean. If you add orange to it, it becomes an orange bean. It becomes tamas, or it becomes bored, or not wanting to without some reason. It's not a mass. It's a T on this side, then it's an O, and then it's a mass, M-A-S on that side, going out. Not M-A-S-S on itself, it's going out. And if you understand the letter math that I'm talking about there, you'll see what I mean, and I'll explain that later. But Tamas, just T-O-M-A-S, is a plus sign on one, a circle separating this next idea, and then M-A-S, saying to manifest an active subject or manifest any source. You know, an action of source. To manifest action of source, you have to do something. But if you're Tamas, and if you're a dumbass, basically, Tamas and dumbass basically are the same word, on purpose, you're purposely lowering yourself. You're eating saucy, fattening, sugary, whatever foods. Sugar's not that bad if you just eat white sugar, but you're not going to have it all by itself, and it's got to be pure, either white or brown, caney kind sugars, and you would eat them plain, a little bit at a time, for the energy that they do give you, for the nutrients they do give your brain, but in little doses. If you add them to sugary things like Kool-Aids and all that kind of stuff, it's not going to do you any good because they're artificial. If the colors are there, like the yellow and the green, they're a little better for you, but if they're not artificially colored, which they usually are, because an artificial yellow and artificial things like that, blues and whatever, they're horrible. They're horrible for you. You don't want them. I mean, these are obvious things that people have talked about but didn't know why. Colors mean a lot. Symbols mean a lot. Letters mean a lot. And people that are unconscious are conscious in a way that they don't know they are. Their higher self will shine through the letters I left behind for Dan Alexander to pick up. And I, as Dan Alexander, pick them up. And everyone else looks at me like I'm goofy. But that's because at one point in my life, I was just trying to do whatever to fit in and be cool. And at the same time, that was really me being me. Because it was a natural feeling. We all do that. We all want to fit in. And just on a different level, my vibration picked up more of that. But now, as a human being, I don't have any of that urge to do something that fits in. Now I pick up and act upon the truth from source itself. Because I'm the source of truth. And everyone else can keep their mind stuck in all these different weird ideas about what's cool and what's hip. And it's not. Nature is the only thing you are. So, as we moved into having senses, that's when we started having other things push us around, because we were still some little and feeble things and timid things that couldn't really move well, and inside itself didn't develop or was too stationary to move, and was Tomas. It didn't do much. So then as other things asserted themselves and moved around, they grew and got bigger because they roamed and gathered more. And as they roamed and gathered more, they adventured. And as they adventured, they took on experiences. Those things that were stationary had experiences, but from gathering from themselves, from light, from soil, and all these different things that have worked through those processes of heating, cooling, growing, vaporizing, and all those things. The fermentation process of the movement by light, heat, and other things moving you. But then those active compounds that created during those things, basically the living gas molecules that grew legs and shapes, because they also had memory of their past, which is always timeless. At that point, it doesn't make any sense to people, but I'm saying your past is timeless, and you are timeless. So these gaseous things that grew, things that can move around with shapes and geometric patterns that they knew from the past in this timeless place without mass, brought it into the time place once they could see and sense, and they were brave enough and had enough memory and effort to put it forth, and brought it from somewhere. Something reminded them on a little level, in the little brain of a little tiny animal, and its sensory organs. It sensed something, and it did something with effort that it didn't have to do, but did, so it could expand. And that's why killing a moving, living thing eats their fear, eats their experience, eats their adventure, eats all their things. And when you kill them, and you raise them to kill them, they're Tomas. They're just grown and led to be killed. And then when they're killed, they're showed with an extra dose of fear to throw onto their dormantness. Dormant, dumbass, doormat, Tomas, they're all right there for you. Don't eat too many tomatoes. Sorry. Add them to things. Eat them fresh. Nothing wrong with tomatoes. Eat them fresh. They're the basis of stuff, but you don't want too much of them. The color matters. The name isn't all that important, but usually they do come fittingly. Some people do call things the wrong thing, and different colors of tomatoes do matter. Different colors into your body do matter. You want some of them so you can wake up all your centers. You want a balance of them all. You don't want a little bit of this and a ton of red, and a ton of orange, and a ton of whatever. But these are the true colors of their natural foods given by God in the sunlight, which is the same thing. Which is, God was way before that, but I'm not going to get into that, but because God is using letters that is way after that we developed as living, walking things that came from where I left off. The light, the energy that moved and now started forming patterns and things that can move gaseously with shapes and geometric patterns, and could move on the ground with shapes and geometric patterns, either growing, staying still, or walking and having motion and thought of their own. And as they adventured and explored, They added more size, they added more mass, they added different shapes, they had different thoughts, they had different appeals in the world. They grew very big, they moved on to civilizations, they developed more people, they grew and grew and grew, and eventually they destroyed themselves. And this has happened. Infinite billions is the same thing as infinite, but just simply infinite times. And as being someone who's been blessed enough to experience it and tormented enough to feel it as a human being who witnesses other human beings not understanding the truth when it's being said straight to their faces, it's very tormenting. But it's also a blessing because this is the truth and it's the only way it can happen. You have to go through the pain so that other people can gain. Not for myself. No pain for me is no gain for you. And that's the way I see it. That's the way it is. And that's the way I'm going to live because you're more important to me than living in a world of other people dominating what we do. So until next time, peace.